The gate stood tall, hidden between two old trees, their branches crossing above like hands clasped together. It wasn't flashy, no gold, no signs, just wood, darkened with age, iron hinges holding it steady. But there was something about it, something that made me stop. I pushed it open. The sound it made wasn't loud, just a low groan, like a whisper from the past. Beyond the gate, a narrow stone path stretched forward, lined with lanterns sunk into the ground. They worked electric. Each one carried a soft flame, flickering against the evening air. The path wound its way slowly, not in a straight line, almost as if it wanted to slow me down. And in that slowing, I began to notice. The grass wasn't trimmed into perfect shapes. It was wild, swaying gently with the wind. The air was different too. It carried scents I couldn't place, something floral, something earthy, something alive. I followed the path until the trees opened, and there it stood.
The house. It wasn't a palace, not the kind that shouts its presence from miles away. Instead, it was quiet, powerful in its silence. The walls were stone, the kind that had stood for centuries. Not polished, not new, but carrying marks, tiny cracks, uneven shades, like lines on a wise face. The roof rose in soft angles, each tile holding its own story. The door was tall, arched, made of thick wood with iron handles shaped like vines. I reached out and touched it. The surface was smooth, where countless hands had pushed it open before me, and yet it still felt strong, unyielding. I pushed. The door swung inwards without a sound. Inside, the air wrapped around me instantly. Cool, calm. Not the artificial coolness of machines, but the kind that comes from walls built thick. Rooms designed to breathe. I took a step forward, and the first thing I saw was light. Above me, the ceiling wasn't flat. It curved high, with wooden beams crossing in patterns that let sunlight stream through tiny openings. The light fell in long, soft lines across the stone floor, moving gently as the day shifted. The floor itself was stone too, smooth but not shiny. Each tile carried patterns of nature, tiny fossils, uneven shades, like it was cut straight from the earth without being forced into perfection. And then my eyes found the table. It stood at the far end of the hall, long and wide, made from a single piece of dark wood. No cloth, no decoration, just the natural grain, swirls and lines running across it like rivers on a map. The chairs around it were simple, carved from the same wood, each one slightly different, as if shaped by hand, not machine. But what truly held me were the walls. They weren't plain. At first glance, they looked simple. Soft cream, light gray. But when I looked closer, I saw textures. Faint strokes, shades blending into one another, like clouds frozen in time. I ran my hand along one wall. It was cool, almost cold, and it felt alive. No paintings, no photographs, no loud colors. And yet, I couldn't look away. Every surface spoke without words. On the left, a staircase rose in a curve, not straight, but gentle, like it wanted to guide, not command. Its railing was iron, smooth to the touch, shaped like vines curling upward. Along the steps, small candles had been placed, each one melted slightly, as if someone lit them every night, letting shadows dance along the walls. I walked further. Each step echoed softly, but the house didn't feel empty. It felt aware, as if it noticed me. An arch opened into a side room. I stepped inside. It wasn't large, just two deep chairs, facing a fireplace. The fireplace had marks of use, blackened stone, faint ash, still resting at the edges. Above it hung a mirror, its edges worn, reflecting the space in a way that made the flames multiply when lit. One wall was covered with books, not arranged by size or color, but in the way someone truly uses them. Some spines cracked, some new, some leaning against others. Stories collected not for display, but for company. I reached out and pulled one book. A thin layer of dust rose, catching the shaft of light from the window. It felt real, like something kept here for years, waiting for someone to return. I closed it and stepped back into the main hall. That's when I heard it, the sound of water. Not loud, not rushing, just a steady rhythm, soft, almost hidden beneath silence. I followed it. Past the staircase, a narrow corridor stretched forward. The sound grew clearer. At the end of the passage, the space opened, and there it was, a courtyard, open to the sky. In the center, a fountain flowed gently, water spilling from one stone tier to another. No grand jets, no force, just a calm, steady flow. Around it, orange trees grew, their leaves glossy, their fruit glowing softly in the sunlight. The air was filled with their scent, fresh, sweet,
warm. I stood there, watching the water, listening, breathing, and I realized something. This house wasn't built to impress the world outside. It was built to slow down the world inside. I walked closer to the fountain, dipping my hand into the water. It was cool, refreshing, carrying with it a strange sense of grounding. The ripples spread outward, catching the reflection of the trees, the sky, the walls.
For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like rushing. I turned slowly, letting my eyes wander. Every detail mattered. The courtyard walls weren't flat. They carried patterns, faint carvings almost hidden in the stone. The ground was paved with uneven tiles, each one different, yet together forming a whole. Above, the sky framed itself like a painting, blue stretching wide with clouds drifting lazily. Birds circled, their shadows passing softly across the fountain. The longer I stood there, the more the house revealed. It wasn't just a structure, it was an experience, a reminder that beauty doesn't need to shout, that silence can hold more than sound, and that sometimes the most powerful spaces are not the ones that overwhelm, but the ones that let you breathe. I sat by the fountain's edge. The scent of oranges filled the air. My reflection stared back from the water, rippling slightly with every drop that fell.
And in that moment, it felt like the house was asking me a question, not in words, not in voice, but in feeling.
The fountain's rhythm stayed in my ears long after I rose from its edge. My fingers still held the coolness of its water as I walked back across the courtyard. The question lingered. Are you ready to see more? I looked up. The staircase curved above, waiting. Each step carried the weight of silence. My hand ran along the railing, the iron smooth beneath my palm. The candles placed along the stairs had melted into strange shapes, drops frozen mid-fall. Shadows leaning against the wall, like forgotten stories. At the landing, the air shifted. The courtyard's scent of oranges faded, replaced by something softer, jasmine, faint but undeniable. The hallway stretched wide. Tall windows lined one side, their glass frosted, letting the moonlight spill inside like mist. The floor here was wood, dark, carrying faint creaks with every step. Yet the sound wasn't disturbing, it was grounding, reminding me that this place was alive, breathing, listening. One door stood slightly open, just enough to invite. I pushed it gently. The room beyond glowed with warmth. 4 lanterns hung in the corners, their flames flickering, painting soft gold across the walls. At the center lay a bed, low, built almost into the floor, its sheets cream-colored, blending with the walls. No clutter, no decoration, just calm. At the far end, the wall opened into a balcony. I stepped out and froze. Below, the courtyard glimmered faintly, a fountain glowing like silver under the moon. Beyond, the land rolled endlessly, quiet, untouched, bathed in pale light. The railing, carved from stone, carried patterns that let the wind pass freely. I leaned forward. The night wrapped around me, the fountain's rhythm, the call of distant birds, the soft rustle of trees. It was all one sound, one breath. I stood there longer than I meant to, until something caught my eye. On the balcony floor, just at the edge, a small mark, a tile different from the others. It wasn't broken, but carved, barely noticeable unless you looked closely. I crouched down. The carving was a circle, with lines running outward like rays. At its center, a hole, no bigger than a coin. I pressed my finger into it. The tile shifted. A soft click echoed beneath me, followed by a faint vibration. The air seemed to pause, and then silence. Nothing moved, nothing opened. The mark remained, still and harmless. But I knew something had been unlocked. I stepped back inside. The lantern flames flickered strangely, as if stirred by a breath that wasn't mine. I glanced around the room. Nothing had changed, or had it? The mirror above the low dresser caught my eye.
Before, it had simply reflected the room. Now, its surface shimmered faintly, as if water rippled across it. I moved closer. The reflection wasn't mine anymore. Instead, I saw the courtyard, but not as it was now. The fountain was dry, the trees bare, the walls cracked. It was the same place, but in another time. My hand rose almost on its own, touching the mirror's surface. It was cool, solid, yet the image continued, shifting. Now the courtyard was full of people. Voices, laughter, footsteps filled the space. Children ran around the fountain, their hands sticky with oranges plucked fresh from the trees. A woman sat near the wall, reading from a book, while others carried lanterns to light the corners. The image faded. My reflection returned. I stumbled back. The flames in the lanterns steadied. The room fell silent again. But the air wasn't the same. The house had shown me something, not the future, not the past, but a memory. I left the room, closing the door softly behind me. The hallway stretched again, but now it felt different, heavier, as if every shadow carried a secret. At the far end, another door waited, larger, darker. I reached it and pushed. The room was vast, almost like a hall. The ceiling soared high, beams arching like ribs. Chandeliers hung low, but they weren't lit. Instead, the only light came from the moon, pouring through tall windows, striking the polished floor in silver. In the center of the hall stood a piano, black, glossy, untouched. Its keys gleamed faintly, waiting. I walked toward it. My footsteps echoed louder than before. I sat on the bench, running my fingers lightly across the keys. Cold, smooth. I pressed one. The note rang out deep and full, hanging in the air. But as it faded, I heard something else. A second note. Not from me. The piano played back, softly, slowly, as if answering. I pressed another key. Again, the piano responded. Not the same note, not the same rhythm. It was a conversation. I pressed faster. The piano kept up. The music built, rising, filling the hall with sound that seemed too much for one instrument. And then, silence. The piano stopped. The last note echoed, long and heavy, until it faded into nothing. I sat still, my hands frozen above the keys. And in that silence, I heard it again, the fountain, distant, faint, but steady. I stood, backing away. The piano remained silent, its surface dark, reflecting only the moon. The hall's doors at the other end stood open now, wide, inviting. I walked through. Beyond them, another staircase waited. This one descended, curving downward into shadow. The air grew cooler with each step, the faint sound of water growing stronger. At the bottom, I entered a chamber that made me stop. It wasn't a basement. It was a sanctuary. The walls were stone, rough, carrying the marks of centuries. At the center, a pool stretched, still and glassy. Above it, a slit in the ceiling let moonlight pour straight down, striking the water, making the entire chamber shimmer. I stepped closer. The surface of the pool reflected not just me, but something else. Figures. They stood around the water, faint and ghostly, their forms barely visible. Some held hands. Some bowed their heads. Others simply stared. They didn't move, didn't speak. And yet I felt no fear, only weight, as if this was a place of remembering. I reached out, touching the water. Ripples spread. The figures vanished. The reflection returned to me. The fountain's rhythm filled the air again, steady, patient. I sat by the edge, and I understood. This house wasn't showing me luxury in gold, diamonds, or wealth. Its luxury was something deeper. The silence, the stillness, the chance to feel time itself slow down. Not everyone would see it. Not everyone would want it. But for those who did, it was priceless. I leaned back, listening to the water. The chamber wrapped around me, timeless, endless, and for the first time, I didn't wonder what was next. I simply stayed. The next morning began in silence, the kind of silence that isn't empty, but full. Full of the whispers of the past, the secrets of time, and the quiet promise of what was still hidden. The mansion's walls seemed to breathe with it. Armin opened his eyes to the filtered sunlight spilling through curtains woven from fabric no longer made in this century. The weight of history was in every detail. The carved, wooden ceiling that carried the patterns of a forgotten dynasty. The ivory clock on the mantel that ticked like a heartbeat from another age, and the faint perfume lingering in the air. Sandalwood, rose, and something he could never name. He sat up, still wearing the expression of a man caught between disbelief and wonder. Last night had been strange. A world of champagne reflections and golden hallways, of voices that seemed too rehearsed, too perfect, as though the house itself had arranged them. But what stayed in his mind was that door, the one he had not opened. It had stood at the end of the corridor, untouched, silent, framed by marble lions that seemed to watch him with living eyes. Something about it had whispered to him, not with sound, but with pull. And yet, for reasons he couldn't explain, he had walked away. Now, as he rose and washed his face in a porcelain basin older than his grandfather's grandfather, he knew one thing. Today, he would open that door. But the house seemed to sense his thought. At breakfast, the long dining table was already prepared. silverware so polished it reflected his face like a mirror, plates of fruits arranged as if by a painter's hand, bread still steaming, coffee poured into cups painted with golden vines, and across from him, she sat again.
The woman, the one who had appeared last night without sound, without introduction, yet as though she had always been there. Her presence was effortless, as though the room was designed for her. She lifted her teacup and spoke, her voice calm, smooth, threaded with something that unsettled him. "You slept well," she said, though it wasn't a question. "Yes," he replied carefully. A smile curved on her lips, one that gave nothing away. "The house likes you." Armin frowned. "A house likes me?" Her eyes, dark as obsidian, met his. "Not everyone is welcomed here. You are." Silence stretched between them. The clink of her spoon against porcelain was the only sound. Finally, she leaned forward, her gaze sharper than before. "There are doors in this house," she said. "Some should remain closed, some should not." Armin felt a chill crawl across his skin. "What's behind them?" Her answer was immediate. "Stories." It was maddening, too vague, too evasive. He wanted to demand more, but something in her tone stopped him. It wasn't fear. It was respect. The kind you give to rules that are older than you. Older than your family, older than your city. She placed the cup down gently, the sound ringing louder than it should. Then, without another word, she stood and walked away, her silk gown trailing behind like a river of night. Armin sat there, pulse steady, but thoughts chaotic. He had two choices: obey the warning or follow the pull, and for as long as he could remember, curiosity had always won. By noon, he found himself in the corridor again. The air was colder here, as though the mansion itself exhaled frost in this part of its body. The door stood at the end, unchanged. The marble lions still watched, unblinking. Armin's hand reached for the handle. For a moment, the silence deepened, as if even the clocks had paused. He turned it. The door opened without resistance. Inside was a room that could not exist. The walls shimmered, not with paint or paper, but with light. Soft, shifting light, like the colors of dawn trapped inside glass. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it a box. Small, wooden, but so perfectly carved it looked like a jewel. Armin stepped closer. The air here felt heavier, richer, like breathing gold. His hand hovered over the box, and, with a trembling breath, he opened it. Inside was a key, but not just any key. This one was unlike metal or gold. It glowed faintly, like it had swallowed a star. The surface shimmered between colors, never the same for more than a heartbeat. And as his fingers closed around it, the mansion shifted. He didn't see it with his eyes, but he felt it. The floor beneath him stretched. The walls expanded. Doors unlocked themselves. Curtains lifted as if by unseen hands. Somewhere deep in the house, gears turned, ancient and deliberate. The house was awake. Armin stumbled back, clutching the key. His heart pounded. He had touched something he shouldn't have, and yet it felt right. Behind him, a voice spoke. "You've chosen." He spun around. The woman was there again. But this time, she wasn't dressed in silk. She wore black, simple, severe, and her expression had changed. No longer soft, no longer mysterious. There was something like sadness in her eyes. "Chosen what?" Armin asked. Her gaze fell to the key in his hand. "To see what others cannot. To walk where others will never walk. But every choice has a price." The key pulsed once in his hand, as if alive. Armin's throat went dry. What price? Her answer was barely a whisper. Time. The word lingered in the air like smoke. Before he could ask again, the lights around him dimmed. The glowing walls flickered, then turned dark, revealing not glass, but endless mirrors. Each mirror reflected him, but not as he was. One showed him as a boy chasing kites. One showed him older, weary, carrying burdens he didn't yet know. One showed him gray, sitting alone in a chair. And one showed him lying still, eyes closed, as if asleep forever. Armin stumbled back, breath ragged. "What is this?" The woman stepped closer. "The house does not show beauty for free. It shows truth, and truth is never cheap." His pulse roared in his ears. He looked at the key again, still glowing in his palm. Despite the terror, something in him couldn't let go. The woman watched him with unreadable eyes. Then, softer than before, she said, "You may still walk away. Return the key, close the door, forget what you've seen." Armin met her gaze, chest heaving. He didn't know why, but he shook his head. "No," he said.
I'm not Wa.
For the first time, her expression broke. Not surprise, not anger, but something deeper, something almost like relief. She whispered, "Then the story begins." And as the words left her lips, the mirrors shattered, one by one, falling into a darkness that seemed endless. The room dissolved, the corridor vanished, and Armin was no longer in the mansion. He was somewhere else entirely, a place where time did not move forward, but in circles, where the air carried echoes, not sounds, where the ground beneath him felt like glass and yet held the weight of 1,000 worlds. The key in his hand burned brighter, pulling him toward the unknown, and Armin, though trembling, stepped forward, because sometimes the only way to live is to follow the story, even if it leads you where you were never meant to go.
The air was no longer the same. It was thicker, charged, like walking through an ocean of whispers. Our man tightened his grip on the glowing key, every step echoing as though the floor itself wanted to remember him. Gone were the velvet carpets and polished marble of the mansion. This new place stretched endlessly in all directions, a corridor without end, where walls shimmered like liquid silver and the ceiling disappeared into shadows. For a moment, our man wondered if he was still in the same world. Then he heard it, a faint sound, soft as breath. Music, not from instruments he knew. No piano, no violin. It was deeper, older, something that carried in its notes both sorrow and beauty. It drew him forward, though each step felt heavier than the last.
The corridor bent, and suddenly it opened into a hall so vast it seemed carved out of the sky itself. Chandeliers floated without chains, glowing with light that wasn't fire, wasn't electricity, but something stranger. The walls rippled with murals, alive, shifting, telling stories that moved before his eyes. He turned and froze. At the center of the hall stood a long table, far grander than the one where he had breakfast. This one was carved from crystal, transparent and gleaming, stretching into the shadows, and around it sat figures. Not people, not quite. They were outlines of people, shapes formed from light and smoke. Their faces were blurred, as though memory itself had sculpted them. Yet they moved, lifting cups, turning heads, speaking words he couldn't hear. Armin's breath caught. These weren't strangers. He knew them. There, his grandmother, who had passed away years ago. Her soft laugh, unmistakable. Beside her, his uncle, the one whose stories had shaped his childhood. And further down, his own reflection, older, lined with years, speaking with a mouth he couldn't hear. He staggered back, heart pounding. The figures didn't notice him. They continued their silent feast, their motions looping in cycles, like ghosts of time repeating themselves. Then, at the head of the table, he saw her. The woman, the one from the mansion. But here, she was different. She wore no silk, no black. Instead, she was dressed in gold, her figure luminous, her face sharper, clearer. She wasn't just present, she was commanding. And for the first time, she looked directly at him. Sit. The word carried no echo, yet it filled the hall. Armand's knees weakened. He wanted to protest, to demand answers, but his body betrayed him. He walked forward, each step heavy, until he reached the table. A chair carved from ivory and glass slid back on its own. He sat. The glowing figures paused, then vanished, dissolving into smoke. Only she remained, her eyes locked on him, steady, unblinking. "You opened the door," she said. "You took the key. Now, you must understand why it exists." Our man swallowed. "What is this place?" Her hand lifted, fingers tracing the air. At once, the hall shifted. The crystal table melted into mist. The chandeliers dimmed, and around them rose images. Not paintings, not mirrors, but visions. He saw cities, glittering under skies filled with machines that flew without wings. He saw oceans boiling, lands swallowed by water, towers piercing clouds. He saw faces, millions of faces, strangers yet familiar, living, laughing, mourning. And then he saw himself, not once, but hundreds of times. In one vision, he was a leader, speaking to crowds. In another, he was broken, lost, sitting in alleys. In another, he was old, surrounded by family. In yet another, he was alone, nameless, forgotten. Each vision flickered like fire, consuming itself. His chest tightened. "What is this?" Her voice was calm, too calm. "These are the lives you might live. The mansion holds them all. Each door a path, each key a choice. You chose this path, and now it shows you the truth." Armand's throat was dry. "Why me?" At this, she leaned closer. The glow around her dimmed, and for the first time, she looked human, almost fragile. "Because you are willing to look."
The silence that followed was unbearable. The visions continued shifting, endless versions of himself burning in and out of existence. Finally, she rose from her seat, her gown spilling like liquid gold across the floor. "Come," she said. He hesitated. "Where?" Her eyes softened, though her tone carried weight.
To the heart of the mansion, to the room where all choices are born.
Armin's grip tightened around the glowing key. He rose slowly, legs trembling, and followed her. The hall dissolved around them as they walked. No doors, no walls, just endless transition, like stepping from one dream into another. At last, they reached it, a vast chamber, unlike anything he had seen before. The floor was a mirror, but it didn't reflect him. It reflected skies, storms, suns, rising and falling. The walls were endless shelves, each holding books bound in colors he didn't know existed. And in the center stood a throne, but not empty. Someone sat there. Armin froze, his breath caught in his chest, because the man sitting on the throne was him, older, stronger, regal, dressed in robes woven with threads of silver and sapphire. His eyes glowed faintly, like embers still alive. And when he spoke, his voice was not one, but many, layered with echoes of himself from different ages. "You found the key," the throne Armin said. Armin stumbled back. What is this?" The golden woman bowed slightly, not to Armin, but to the throne. "The seeker has arrived." Armin's head spun. His voice cracked. "Seeker? What are you talking about? Who is he?" The throne Armin rose. His steps were heavy, deliberate, shaking the chamber as though time itself bent beneath his feet. He stopped inches away, staring at him with eyes too familiar. "I am what you may become." The throne Armin said, "The mansion is not just a house. It is a mirror of possibility, and every seeker who enters must face their future." Armin shook his head, fear clawing at his chest. "No, this isn't real. This can't be real." The throne Armin's gaze hardened. "Real or not, the choice is yours. Will you take the path, or turn away? But know this, once you choose, there is no return." The golden woman's voice rose, clear, ringing through the chamber. "The heart of the mansion does not wait. Decide." Armin looked at the glowing key in his hand. It pulsed harder now, alive, urgent. His mind raced. If this was a dream, why did it feel so heavy? If this was a lie, why did it feel so true? His chest heaved. Sweat stung his eyes. His pulse thundered in his ears. The throne Armin stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You wanted answers. Here they are. The mansion is not a gift. It is a test. And you, Armin, are running out of time." The word struck him like a blade. Time. The same word the golden woman had whispered before. The same truth he had been warned about. Armin's hand tightened on the key. His heart pounded. The chamber seemed to lean closer. The books whispering, the mirrored floor glowing brighter. Every corner demanded a decision. And in that suspended moment, Armin realized one thing. There was no going back.
The chamber was alive. The shelves of books trembled as if struck by a silent wind. The mirrored floor rippled, skies shifting beneath Armin's feet, and between the thunder of his heartbeat and the weight of silence, one truth pressed against him. This was the end. The golden woman stood at the edge of the chamber, her gown shimmering with fading light. The throne, Armin loomed, his figure solid, powerful, every movement echoing with finality. And Armin, he stood in the middle, the glowing key burning hot in his hand, its pulse matching his heart. "Time has caught you," the throne Armin said, voice layered with echoes. "Choose." The word struck like lightning. Choose. Armin staggered back, his thoughts spun like storms. He had walked through hidden doors, crossed halls that bent reality, seen visions of himself in countless lives. And now, this? How could anyone decide when the weight of every possibility pressed into a single moment? He looked at the golden woman. "If I choose, what happens?" Her eyes flickered with something human. Pain, maybe regret. "You live with it, forever. And if I don't?" The throne Armin's voice rumbled. "Then the mansion decides for you. And trust me, its choice is crueler than your own." The chamber darkened. The floating books flapped like restless wings. The mirrored floor glowed with storms, lightning splitting skies that weren't real. Armin's knees trembled. His voice cracked. "Why me?" The throne Armin stepped forward. His presence was unbearable, like staring into a fire too close. "Because you dared to enter. Because you wanted more.
You searched for the door when others walked past. That desire brought you here. Desire. The word cut deep. He remembered the gate, the path, the fountain, the endless halls. He hadn't come searching for power, had he? He had only followed a whisper. Or maybe that was enough. The golden woman's voice softened. Every seeker asks the same question.
But none can escape the answer. Armin's grip tightened on the key until his hand shook. It glowed brighter, searing his skin. He wanted to let it go, to throw it into the storm. But he couldn't, because deep down, he knew. The key wasn't holding him. He was holding onto it. The throne, Armin's eyes locked with his. So, what will it be? Silence. Heavy. Unforgiving. Armin looked into the mirrored floor. He saw himself. Not one version, but many. One standing in wealth. One broken in darkness. One surrounded by family. One lost in solitude. Each life flickered like a flame, begging to be chosen, begging to be lived. His chest rose, fell. The golden woman waited. The chamber leaned closer. Armin closed his eyes. The words left his lips, soft, almost trembling. I choose. The key erupted in light. Blinding, pure, consuming. The chamber shook, shelves crashing, visions exploding into shards of brilliance.
The mirrored floor shattered, skies breaking into fragments that rained upward, and through it all, Armin felt himself pulled into the light, pulled into the choice. The golden woman's voice echoed faintly, fading with the storm. So it begins, then silence. When Armin opened his eyes, he was no longer in the chamber. He stood at the mansion's gate. The same wooden gate, dark with age, iron hinges holding steady. The path stretched before him, lanterns glowing softly in the evening air. Birds called in the distance. The world was calm, ordinary, too ordinary. He turned. The mansion stood as before, quiet, powerful in its silence, but something had changed. The air around it shimmered faintly, as though reality itself bent at its walls, and in his hand, the key was gone.
Instead, his palm bore a faint mark, an imprint of the key shape glowing softly before fading into his skin. Armin's breath trembled. Was it real? A dream? A test? His body felt heavy, his mind scattered, yet something deep inside whispered, nothing would ever be the same. He stepped back, staring at the mansion one last time. Its windows reflected only the sky. Its doors stood closed, unmoving, silent, watching. And then he walked away. The path behind him groaned under his steps. Lantern flamed, swaying as if bowing farewell. The gate loomed closer, its wood darker now, its iron heavier. Armin pushed it open. The sound it made wasn't a groan this time, it was a sigh. He crossed it. The gate closed behind him, and just like that, the mansion disappeared. Gone. As if it had never been, only the wind remained, carrying scents of earth and wildflowers. The world was as it had been, untouched, unaware. People passed in the distance, their lives moving as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But Armin knew better, because inside his chest, something had shifted. A weight, a clarity, a fire. The choice he had made, whatever it was, now lived inside him. It would guide him, taunt him, shape him. And though the mansion was gone, its silence followed him. A silence that whispered one truth, again and again. The mansion never truly leaves. It waits, it watches, and someday it will open its doors again.